in Asia and around the world. So the city is facing a variety of problems: low birth rate, low fertility rate, limited upward mobility for children and for the young people, and of course, population aging. So all these causes and effects are intertwined. So to solve problem A, you have to solve problem B, and then to solve problem B, you have to come back to solve problem C. So all these, this is a really, really big, in policy sciences, we call this a policy deadlock. So today we have 5 very distinguished individuals here to share their insights with us and see if they can, provide some sort of solutions to solve this policy deadlock. So before we start, let me briefly introduce the 5 distinguished individuals. So Professor Anthony Cheung, he's currently the adjunct professor of the Division of Public Policy at HKUST, and he was the former president of the Education University of Hong Kong before he joined the Hong Kong SAR government as the former secretary for housing, transport and housing between 2012 and 2017. And we also have Professor Tai-lok. He's a very renowned sociologist. So he's the chair professor of sociology at EdUHK, and he also served as the vice president of the university. And then we have Professor Paul Yip, a very renowned demographer. So he's a chair professor at the Department of Social Work and Social Policy at HKU. And he also specializes in population health and so on. So he's among a variety of world rankings, Elsevier and Stanford rankings as one of the top 1% scholars around the world in his area. And then we also have Dr. Wendy, and she's currently a member of the Legislative Council. So Dr. Hong is very active in promoting social policy reforms. So her major agenda, her major advocacy is to construct the so-called olive-shaped society in Hong Kong. So with a focus on promoting upward social mobility, providing opportunities for the younger generation. And then last but not least, Professor Heiwai Tang, and he's the Victor and William Fung Professor in Economics at HKU. So prior to joining HKU, he was a tenured associate professor at Johns Hopkins University. So we have a very impressive, very distinguished lineup of scholars. So we truly look forward to this meaningful discussion. So as I understand, the format is very simple. So each of the speakers will spend 12 minutes, and they have all nicely, very, very kindly provided and prepared slides. And then the floor will be open and to the in-person and virtual participants. So in total, hopefully we'll end this event by 12 o'clock. So without further ado, let me first invite Professor Anthony Cheung to give his talk. Professor Cheung, please.
Thank you very much, Alex, for the introduction. The topic today is Hong Kong's population policy working? Now, as the first speaker, I'll try to provide an overview of some major points. And on our panel, we have speakers from different fields related to this topic. I'm sure they will provide more detail when their turn comes for them to speak. Now, there is a population policy in Hong Kong. The government set up a task force in 2002 to discuss the formulation of population policy. And subsequently, the population policy was reviewed a couple of times in 2007 and 2012. A major review was conducted in 2015. Now, the policy itself covers a wide range of policy fields like education, elderly care, attraction of outside talent, and of course, retention of local talent, integration of new arrivals, and medical services. Now, the 2015 review led to an action agenda. As you can notice from the slide on the right-hand side, it covers quite a large range of policy areas: extending working life, enhancing training and employment support for the elderly, helping women in work and family commitments, enhancing the quality of our homegrown talent, attracting overseas talent, importation of labor, better support for young people to start a family, and active aging. And in 2018, a committee known as the HRPC, Human Resources Planning Commission, was set up to coordinate efforts of government and other sectors in the community. Now, the current administration also introduced some important initiatives, like the Top Talent Pass scheme among the new talent admission schemes, sector-specific labor importation schemes. Now, before that, the major scheme was the supplementary labor scheme, which was rather cumbersome, a lot of restrictions, very long process in order to get approval to import external labor. Now, the new sector-specific labor schemes was more flexible. And then there is a new office set up within government known as the Hong Kong Talent Engage, trying to coordinate efforts and the publicity for the purpose of attracting outside talent. The current administration put special emphasis on family-friendly measures. And as you can notice, there's a rather interesting initiative known as the newborn baby bonus of 20,000 Hong Kong dollars. And that is to encourage young couples to have a child. Now, in terms of population policy concerns, I can name a few major concerns. The demographics, what does that tell us? The health and quality of life of our population, in other words, the health of the human stock in our society, education and productivity. Education has to do with the health or the quality of the population, productivity in terms of contribution to our economy. But there's also a concern regarding the two ends of the population, the young and the elderly. Are they satisfied or are they discontented, anxious? I would say they are rather anxious and sometimes discontented. Hong Kong is not alone facing demographic challenges. As an example, the OECD last year published a report known as Demographic Change in Cities, Trends, Challenges and Insights from G7 economies. And the concerns are quite common among mature economies or developed economies. Aging population, decreasing household size, poverty, the housing issue, and how to be more inclusive in terms of incorporating services for the elderly, supporting them. And the conclusion from that report still tries to strike a positive note that demographic change also brings opportunities as well as problems and issues. So the challenge is how to manage city population growth or decline. Now, if you look at Hong Kong, I'm trying to be very brief here because the other speakers will speak in greater detail. In terms of demographics, Hong Kong is aging. By 2046, it is projected that those aged 65 and above will be more than 1/3 of our population. Now, if we use 60 as the dividing mark, the percentage will be even higher. Birth rate is declining, so we have an issue of how to replenish our human stock. But then we have outward migration, which is quite getting more serious in recent years. Now, we don't have an exact figure from government, but if you look at the figure of the BNO visa introduced by the UK, I think up to now, probably over 200,000 of our population have already been granted approval to migrate there, and many of them have already moved to the UK. The Gini coefficient, now this is the figure based on median household income, post-tax and post-social transfer. Now it's improving over the years, but that also tells us that if there is no social transfer, then the disparity will be quite notable. So in other words, the primary distribution may not be as desirable as one expects. In terms of the health of the population, one indicator, of course, is life expectancy. And Hong Kong has one of the highest rates in Asia and the world. Here I also, on the slide, I also show the outcome of the WHO Quality of Life Questionnaire results, self-rated. Now you can notice out of the highest of 20, we get 15.4 for physical health, 14.8 for psychological health, 14.3 for social relations, and 14.3 for environmental domain. So by and large, we are not doing too badly. So in terms of quality, in terms of longevity, we are fine, but we are aging. Education. Looking at education statistics, we are doing quite well. 80.9% of our population, of the secondary school students, they can get into post-secondary education. So the post-secondary participation rate is quite high, higher than when Hong Kong became an SAR in 1997. In terms of the young adults aged 25 to 34, 61.4% had attended post-secondary education. So education quality, fine, and we all know that we do quite well in PISA, the PISA program of the OECD in terms of the achievements of students in mathematics, reading, and science. Hong Kong's universities are ranked very highly among international universities. So education, fine, but of course, whether our education fits our purpose of further development, social and economic development, that is an issue that we should look at more closely. Unemployment is low, whether for overall unemployment and the young people. But labor force participation rate is on the decline, as you can see from the slide on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side. And the economy, the whole economy productivity has been rather stagnant in recent years. So that is an indicator that our growth may be affected. And because of aging workforce, because of low or slow productivity growth, so the question is whether Hong Kong can be as competitive as we would like it to be. Labor productivity index has been rather stagnant. If you look at the last column on the right-hand side of the slide of the last few years, the overall economy. So issues and challenges. First of all, I said earlier that the health or the quality of housing stock, human stock is quite good. But the population seems to be rather unhappy. The World Happiness Index, according to that index, Hong Kong ranked 86 out of 144 last year. Our population is less happy than on the mainland and also in Taiwan, for example. For young people under 30, we are ranked 97 out of 144, so rather unhappy, despite the education provided, despite the sort of the health services. And young people are discontented. They are also wondering whether, despite the fact that they are better educated, whether they are gainfully engaged. And we also should ask ourselves as educationalists whether we are providing the new generation with the right skills for the 21st century. The digital skills, adaptive skills, and critical thinking. And these are very important for the new economy. The population is fast aging, so the fiscal burden, the dependency ratio are getting worse. But of course, the question is, can we turn the so-called burden into opportunity? Opportunity not just in terms of a grey economy. In other words, we have grey customers in the market, but also how to turn the grey generation into productive forces in the new economy. So that's something we should look at. The productivity stagnation. Now, in order to improve ourselves, I think it's not just to do more of the same. We have to reinvent productivity. In other words, we have to look at those components of productivity and see how we could enhance the value addedness of productivity. Hong Kong has always been a city of imagination, a can-do city, can be reinvented. Now, earlier I mentioned that we are facing a serious brain drain. Of course, we are also getting new talent coming in through the talent admission schemes, particularly from the mainland. But one thing to notice is that according to government figures, the top talent pass scheme, 95% are mainlanders. Does that mean that we are less attractive to non-mainland talent? If that's the case, why? Can we do more? Because the central government expects Hong Kong to be even more international. And according to a recent survey by Chinese University of Hong Kong in November last year, that's a survey on their intentions. 34.1% of the residents said they intended to leave Hong Kong, compared to 37.7% in 2023. So this atmosphere is not too positive. So why are people thinking of leaving? So I think that's another question that we need to ask. So overall, I think we need to have proper pull-side strategies and push-side strategies. Pull-side meaning that how do we attract people coming in? How do we attract talent from all over the world, apart from the mainland? Push-side meaning how do we deal with those push factors, those factors pushing some of our population to move out? Do we have a strategy of retention? It's not just a matter of rhetoric, but we need concrete strategies. And we also need to ensure that there is no mismatch or overmatch in terms of the talent that are coming in. The last point about growing the population. I remember since the time of Donald Cheung, our second chief executive, we have been talking about increasing the population of Hong Kong. Some nearby cities are fast enlarging the population because scale is important to some extent. Now, if Hong Kong is to grow a population, right now our population is rather stagnant at around 7 odd million. So we want to improve, expand the population to say 10 million. That's a figure mentioned by some people. Are we able to do that? Is the physical infrastructure sufficient? Is the social infrastructure beneficial or conducive to such expansion? So in conclusion, I would say that in terms of population policy, we are not just dealing with demographics. We are not just dealing with the economics. It's a kind of social envisioning. What kind of Hong Kong we envision the city to be? And then other parts of the government policy should be tied to population policy as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheung, for this very comprehensive and short overview, which sets the scene pretty well for subsequent discussions. And so next the speakers will be Professor Paul Yip, and hopefully he will be talking about, from the demography point of view. Thank you, Professor Yip, please.
Okay, thank you for the invitation to come to UST, and then I'd like to share some of the figures, and then let the figures then tell the story, right? Now it says this slide looks like a trap. I mean, we say that Hong Kong fall in the fertility trap. I mean, that means we experience as one of the lowest fertility, and then we do not see in the foreseeable future we are going to manage to get hold from the trap. Now, I think Anthony has mentioned something about this population structure. Actually, I mean, to understand population is rather simple. We look at the people who die, I mean, and who give birth, and they have moved out, and they have moved in. Once we have these 4 parameters, then we can know pretty sure that what is the population size to be, I mean, in the future. Now, as we all have said, I mean, the people moving out, they have been outnumbered of the people moving in, and also moving out and moving in is not just a mathematical problem. It's not just when we have 5 people moving in, 5 people moving out, then we have no problem. It's not quite true. So it's just more than a numbers, okay? And also, I mean, you look at the number of birth and number of death, And then what you can see, I think in Hong Kong in 2020, I think the number of death or number of birth, I think by about 20,000. Now it is going to get worse. So the only thing to retain the Hong Kong population size is that by the migration. But as I said before, I think the migration itself is just more than a mathematical problem. And also what you can see, I think in Hong Kong, I think we see the number of children comes down, but the number of pets goes up. So now I think, and then actually you can see, I think the Chinese couples, I think they have dogs, and then the Western couples, at least they have 2 children. So I think that's what we have. I think this depopulation is not only happening in Hong Kong, and actually in other places, in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, Japan, and South Korea, they have the same problem. And actually this morning when I read the newspaper, then they say that the number of births in China, it actually has come down. I think it is the lowest now, even I think with the Dragon Year effect. So they say that, well, it is going to fall even lower, I think, in the future. I think that is the challenge. It's not only in Hong Kong, it's also in mainland China as well. So when a lot of people, they try to hedge, I think, well, we still have the people from mainland China to come to help the Hong Kong population. It's not quite true, because in China, they themselves, I think they gone through also a very rapid, I think, this sort of aging situation. Okay, Hong Kong is small, right? I mean, we all know that we have 1,000 kilometers, the square kilometers, but I know, as we said, that we only live in 7% of the land. So how can we improve the place, make it as a livable place? I mean, just what Andrew said. How can we stop the push factors? One of the push factors, I mean, for many people, I mean, to leave Hong Kong, they complain about, I mean, the quality of living, the size of the apartment. I think these are the important things that we need to talk about. And also in Hong Kong, I think the population, it goes fast. I think it's just the rate of changes. Now in 1971, Anthony and I think were has born, right? I mean, we are somewhere there.
Yeah, we're more. Yeah.
Okay, we are somewhere
earlier
there.
than
Okay, the 1981, it goes fast. 2021, 2021, and 2021. Now, as you can see, some of the young people here, I think if you were somewhere in the 15 to 24, how would you like to live in this society? There's so many people above you, isn't it? And then there are not many people coming up. So you do feel that there's a very pressurized, right? I mean, you are the one who are going to shoulder off a lot of responsibility. So actually in 2021, and then we had 2031, and then I think with God's grace, I think we still survive. I mean, in 2041, you see that is what is going to happen. But this population projection, as I said, that is done by the CNS. But if you don't think that population structure is healthy, what can you do? We do not wait until 2041 to do something. We do something now, and then to try to make this population pyramid more healthy, right? So by looking at this, as you can see, well, there is certain part, I do like to make it a bit bigger. I mean, to ensure that the population pyramid is a bit more healthy, I mean, so 2051, that is what happened. And previous life expectancy is going up. During the COVID, I think it has come down. But the problem in Hong Kong, it is not only we are living longer, but not necessarily healthier. So we have this problem. We extend our life expectancy, but our hospitalization rate, it is higher. So if we can compress our so-called the compression of the mobility, it's okay. We live longer, healthier, get into the economic productivity, that is fine. But the thing is not true. So we say that it's the temporal and the quantum defect. So it's not temporal, it's as fast, and it occurs in a short time. In France, it takes them 200 years. No, they take them 100 years to double their 65%, age 65, the proportion in the community. But in Hong Kong, everything is fast. We can achieve in 30 years. So I think that is the situation. You have more time to do the preparation. But in a short time, I think you really need to be very good, I think, in responding to the changes. So you can see that is the rate of change. Now, this change is not linear now. So by the 2021, you can see the rate of changes. I think there's a point of deflection there. So it is going to go up, and it's going to fast. And also, as you mentioned, the strengthening of the workforce. I think that is very important. Who is going to pay for the money? right? Who is going to pay the, so now our research is coming down now. I think they is a major concern. Our population side is still going up, but the one who actually engage in the workforce, it is coming down. So actually you do not need to have a crystal ball, and then you know that there is some wrong. So we call it the tsunami. So now we are still okay, but it is going to come, and it's going to hit us hard. So we also say that not only the quantity, and also it's not only the quantity, the quality of the people too, the poverty is one of the situation that we have to deal with. Whether, how can we deal with this? I think it's not easy, it is difficult. And then that is there's a number I said. I mean, the people, they live longer, but the proportion of people that is not healthy, it is increasing. So actually, the hospitalization rate, it is higher, and then the hospital bed taken up by the older adults will be even higher as well. And also the suicide rate as well. I mean, as I'm the director of the suicide prevention, and then actually the older adult suicide is also going up. Okay. Now, because I know I have a limit of time, but I'd like to give you some solution, right? I mean, so the loneliness, and then we say the people who are lonely, I think their life expectancy, it is not doing as good as those people who do not feel lonely. Now, we have mentioned about the government give the $20,000, I think, to the newborn baby. Now, in one of our elasticity analysis, it showed that it is not the major factors to contribute to the decline of the TFR is not among the married couple. It's just the proportion of people who do not get married. In our analysis, it showed that it's about 67%. So 67% is this, you have to get the people to get married first. Then I think they will start to have babies. Now, I know the Hong Kong government, I mean, gives $20,000, I mean, to all the newborn baby. You know how many baby we have got, I mean, in 2024? Because of, I'm not quite sure it's because of that policy, but I think we have about 2,000 or 3,000 people, a bit more, out from the 30,000. So it actually, we are talking about, if you are thinking about this, without this policy, we have 30,000 baby already, right? But now with this policy, we might have 2,000 more. Actually, this 2,000, if you think that it is contributed by this policy, you know how much money we have spent? We have spent $600 million, 600 million, because 20,000 for 30,000 babies. So we have talked about $600 million, I think, for this 2,000 babies. It's very expensive baby. So I think we love our babies now. So, but what we have turned out that in all our study, it has been shown it is to get the people to get married first. Okay, if they don't get married, they are not going to have a baby. Okay, so and then we believe that I mean when we do the population policy, you look at the individual, community, and the population level. The weather is good today, but when it rains, you need to have a shelter. You need to have an umbrella to keep yourself dry. But if the individual cannot help themselves, it's good the community. I think it's the community who can produce this, make Hong Kong to be a livable places. Now you can see it. I mean, we have this elderly, I mean, the situation. What happened? I mean, because I think we do not pay these people a lot of money. Okay, our heart. I mean, there's older adults, and then when you look at the other countries, they use these trucks already. Now, so now you're talking about we do not have enough workers, right? I mean, we need to increase the productivity. The productivity, if we can invest on this, I think that we can reduce the number of workforce in this area. But then this also outsourcing companies say that, well, if I only have the contract for 2 years, how can I invest to buy these trucks? I mean, if I buy these trucks, after 2 years, if I do not have the contract, what I'm going to do, I cannot drive these trucks. I need to go to do shopping, right? So I think there's a lot of things that we have to talk about how to make our community, I think, more efficient. Now, when you talk about the demographic window, you're right. I think at the 60, I think it is that when you have enlarged it to 65, you give yourself more choices. I think to deploy, I think your manpower to do the work. So, and then migration. Now, one thing I like to highlight, I think this country, from America to Australia, these are the countries who are benefit from the migration. The other at the bottom, these are the countries, I think, who are suffer from the net migration. And so I think if we really want to attract the people in, then we should look at, hey, what this country consists of, or what this country makes it so appealing, and such that we can replicate it in Hong Kong, then we can attract the people to come in. Now in Hong Kong, I think in 2011 and 2016, I think our migration pattern is a bit different. I think we can see in 2011, there's a lot of older people, they're moving out from Hong Kong, and then there's a lot of younger people to move in. But in 2016 and 2021, it's a different story, right? And then you can see that particularly on 15 to 19 and 2024, we are losing quite a lot of people. And then now, having said that, without migration, our population structure is even worse. It will look like this. So of course, we welcome migration, but we welcome the migration in an orderly manner. We also provide a good fit, I think, to the Hong Kong development, such that Hong Kong can attain this sustainable development. Okay, so we are talking about productivity, we are talking about labor force, we are talking about population structure. These are the things that we have to look at. One thing I do like to raise the awareness, I mean, in Hong Kong, and then we have the Greater Bay Area now. And then one thing, when you're looking at the Greater Bay Area, their population structure, they're doing much better than in Hong Kong. You say there's a lot of young people. So when you go to Shenzhen for your weekend, you can see there's a lot of young people, a lot of activities. Right? So it looks in Hong Kong, I mean, by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock after, I mean, when you even go to Causeway Bay, it's so quiet, right? But then you can see this is the population structure in Shenzhen. If I were the mayor of Shenzhen, I'm doing very well. So I have little to support, I think, the younger generation. I have less support to the older. These all are economic active people. I mean, that is the population, what we are doing about. Okay, so at the end of the day, I say, well, I mean, the Hong Kong government or in our other government, they also have to deal with the problem. I mean, when you deal with the population policy, when you use 1 glass of water to put off the water, can it be done? No, right? Then the government's telling you, I give you 6 glasses of water. Can it be done? No, of course it cannot be done. We really have to think out of the box, right? I think we have to not only look at the downstream problem, we look at the upstream problem. I mean, how to do it effectively. I mean, just like when you have the metaphor, when you have the flooding, you have to not only, of course, when they are drowning, you have to take him and out from the water. But at the end of the day, you need to have a long-term planning. We're looking at the quantity, quality, short-term, long-term, hardware, software, the well-being, and also what we believe that the co-creation and co-sharing is very important. So, and then when we talk about sustainable development, we ensure no one is left behind. I think we ensure the voice of the Hong Kong people can be heard, especially the young people, and such that they feel that they are part of the community. I think as what they suffer from 3D problem, right? So I think this is something that we have to look at. And then I always believe that a good population policy, evidence-based, with logic, transparent, public engagement. I think that is very important. You have to let the public voice to be heard in the whole engagement process. I would like to achieve this reality, equality, equity, and the justice. I think if we want to make Hong Kong to be a good place for the people to live, I think the reality is bad. Even the equality, we still suffer from this problem. When we talk about we like to achieve an equity and justice societies, I think that would be good for everyone. And at the end of the day, embracing hope and facing our challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yip. And you not only analyzed the problem very well, but also provided some solutions. And the community-based approach and the GBA possibilities all sound very, very good. So now I just turn to Dr. Hong Wen, and so the Legislative Council member. So she will be, sharing with us her insights. Dr. Hong, please.
Turn on.
Long press until the green light shows. Yes, yeah. It's on.
Hello. Yeah. Thanks, Professor Cheung for inviting me here again. I think the Policy Dialogue series is a very important platform for us to be able to access to some high quality policy discussions. Today, I will focus on one single indicator of the, our demographic trends. That is the labor force participation rate. I think it is a very critical issue that affects our economy and the society. Labor force participation rates is a critical indication that reflects the proportion of active population in our working age population. We just talk about the ideal size of Hong Kong. Some people mentioned that the ideal size might be 110 million. But if we look at the formula for calculating labor force participation rates, we will see the numerator above the line is the labor force, which means employed or actively seeking employment. That is very critical because if we just increase the numerator under the line, which means the working age population, we may have some passive population which cannot contribute significantly to our society. So I think when we try to attract more people to Hong Kong, it is of the same importance to increase our labor force participation rates and to promote more active population in the society. So I think a higher labor force participation rates means more individuals of working age who are engaged in the labor force. It helps mitigate the challenges posed by an aging population because we have more active labor force. It will help alleviating potential labor shortage. And it also means we need to empower diverse demographic groups, including women, including older workers, ethnic minor groups, etc. To elevate the labor force participation rate, we need to creating an inclusive environment that encourage participation across demographics. Now, let's dive into some data here. Let's begin with the historic context. Can I point? No, actually. If we look at the trends in Hong Kong's labor force participation rate, we can see it peaked at 66.5% in 1982, that is 40 years ago. But we can see a continuous downward movement since then. And today it is of 56.9 in 2024, raising concerns regarding economic productivity and social engagement. So we see a continuous downward movement of our labor force participation rate. Now let's focus on specific age groups. The golden working age for Hong Kong residents is between 25 to 49 years old, with labor force participation rates exceeds 80%. And the highest labor force participation rate in last year is from the age group 30 to 34, peaking at 87%. And if we compare, if you look at the data from the last decade, from 2015 to 2024, labor force participation rates of people above 40 years old has increased actually, and particularly for the age group above 45 years old, we can see, for the past decade, we cannot argue that the dropping labor force participation rate is due to aging, because the aged people, they are increasing aged person to join the labor market. Then we can see the labor force participation rate for the age between 30 to 49 is relatively stable. There's quite minor fluctuations. So what is driving the overall decline in labor force participation rates in Hong Kong during the past decades? It's from the age group under 30. We can see a big drop in labor force participation rates for young people under 30. So why are younger individuals opting out of the market force? Maybe higher education, maybe outbound immigration, but can that cannot explain the whole reason here? I have a question mark. Now let's look into the labor force participation trends in Hong Kong by age and gender. The blue bars are for male and the purple bars are for female. And we compare the data of 2015 and 2024, so 10 years change. First, the labor force participation rate for kids, for people aged 15 to 19, we can see a significant drop of 5.3. And for male, it's and 5% for female. If we look at the age group of from 20 to 24, we can see a staggering drop of 10%, 8% for male, and 12% for female. So again, can education alone and the outbound immigration explain the reason behind these declines? Now let's look at the gender differences. For the age group from 15 to 24, the labor force participation rate of women was slightly higher than that of the male counterparts. It's higher actually, but from the age 25 to 29, male participation began to surpass female by 5.5%. And the gap became wider when we come to the age of 30 to 39, the gap exceeds 10%. And the gap enlarged when women reached 40 years old, and between 40 to 45, 14 to 55, the disparity grew even higher to 17 or 20%. And the highest gap is at the age of 50 to 64, which with a gap existing 20%. Then above 65, the gap declined to 10%, 10.7%. So we can see there's a dramatic decline in women's labor force since 30 years, and particularly since 40 years old. If we look at the female specifically, the labor force participation rate of female peaked at 83.2 for the year of 25 to 29 and declined since they are 30. And the dropping accelerated from 40 years old. If we look at the male, the labor force participation rate peaked at 90% for people aged 30 to 49 and declining after they hit 50 years old. And there's a notable acceleration of the dropping since they become 55 years old. So overall, we can see male have a higher labor force participation rate than women by above 10%. but the gap is decreasing. During the past 10 years, we can see increasing labor force participation rate of women during the past 10 years. Now, let's compare the data of Hong Kong with some our neighbors. The first is Singapore. Actually, if we compare Hong Kong and Singapore, the blue bars are Hong Kong in 2028 and 2024. And the yellow bars are Singapore, also 2018 and 2024. We can see Hong Kong lags in every age gap in compared to Singapore, with an overall total, the bar on the right side, with a total gap of 11.3%, which is very huge, which means more than 10%, of our population compared with Singapore are not active laborers. And the disparity is minor below 29 years old, but it widens significantly for the years of 30 to 49, with a difference of 7% to 8%. But the difference increased significantly to almost 20% when people reached 60. So we can see there's considerable population increasing in labor force participation rate across all age groups in Hong Kong, especially among middle-aged and the elderly. If we compare Hong Kong to Japan, we always see, when I discuss this phenomenon of low and dropping labor force participation rate with our Secretary of the Welfare and the Labor, he answered this is because of aging. Then now let's compare Hong Kong to Japan. Japan is a super aging society, and it entered into aging society faster than us. But we can see the labor force participation rate of Japan is higher than Hong Kong by 5.6% last year, which is quite big differences. Actually, in 2017, several years ago, Hong Kong is 0.6 higher than Japan, a little bit slightly higher than Japan. But since 2018, there's a reverse trend. And particularly for population above 55 years old, Japan's labor force participation rates continues to rise. There's a striking difference of 20% difference for the age group 55 to 64 in 2020. Japan has more than 80% of their population above 50 working, but Hong Kong only 58%. Let's compare Hong Kong and South Korea. Again, South Korea is relatively stable with slight increase, but Hong Kong continuous decline. The gap is 2.5 in 2017, but 7% in 2023, which is quite big. And if we compare the population above 55, South Korea has a participation rate of 11.7 higher than that of Hong Kong, which means we have significant potential to increase our senior partisans, engagement in workplace. Let's compare Hong Kong versus mainland. Labor force participation rates in China experience slight fluctuation. There's a small decline of 1.9%, but we compared with mainland, we declined 3.8%, which is more significant, and the gap narrowed during COVID period, but widened again, reaching 9.5%, 9.9% in 2023. Now, this chart compare Hong Kong with other Asian economies. We can see in the past decades, particularly in 2024, Hong Kong has the lowest lowest labor force. Hong Kong is the yellow, the brown, the yellow bar, and it has the lowest labor force participation rate last year. And Singapore has the highest, Macau the second. But if we compare Hong Kong and Macau, quite huge difference, although overall, culture are similar to each other. So I think the difference cannot be explained by culture, as I think there are some systematic reasons for Hong Kong's low and dropping labor force participation rates. I think this is a pressing issue for Hong Kong of a low labor force participation rate. The most significant decline happens in the age of 20 to 24. And can education explain all? I have a question mark. And there's a substantial gap between men and women for people above 30, particularly 40. So we have great potential to increase, women's participation in job markets. If we compare Hong Kong with other regions, Hong Kong has significant potential to enhance its labor force participation rate across all age groups, and even greater room for growth in labor force participation rate for middle-aged individuals, especially above 55. Now, as conclusion, I would like to mention two reasons I think also contributed to lower labor force participation rate in Hong Kong. First is our social welfare system. Actually, data show that 3/4 of our low-income families have no employment at all. A significant percentage of such family are able-bodied person and are neither elders or caregivers. Of course, there are families, they are senior citizens, they have a child, they have some members of disability, they drop out of market. But there's a significant percentage of such family that nobody works, they don't have any, caregiver, they are able-bodied person of working age. And more than 80% of their income is from our social welfare expenditures. And another reason contribute to the low working rates in Hong Kong, I think is related to our housing system, because the government prioritize disadvantaged group by allocating our resources primarily to public rental housing. There's a lack of housing ladder for people to climb up the ladder. I believe the issue for Hong Kong is not a shortage of public housing, rather the absence of housing ladder that allow people to climb beyond public housing. Now, when we allocate most resources to public rental housing become the best choice for the public. We can see increasing young people either quitting their jobs or deliberately control their income in order to be qualified for queuing up for the public rental housing. And we can see a downward mobility in the society because there's no ladder for public rental housing citizens to move up, to move out the public rental housing. So I think this has contributed to, declining labor force participation rate because they have to be qualified for keeping their public rental housing. They deliberately limited their income. So as conclusion, I would say that addressing this challenge will require education, social support system, workforce integration strategy, but we also need comprehensive policy reforms. And we need to foster an environment that encourages participation across all demographics to enhance our productivity and address the economic challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hong, and your analysis on the labor market perspective has truly enriched our discussion. Now we hand over to Professor Tang, and hopefully we can hear some insightful economics analysis. Professor Tang, please.
Thank you, Professor Cheung and Professor Lui, for inviting me back again. This time to talk about the implications of population aging for the Hong Kong economy. As the fourth person to speak in the panel, I actually have very little to contribute. I learned a lot in the last hour from the three distinguished panelists who already talk about the challenges, the potential solutions, and especially from Wendy, who talk about why low labor market participation is a huge challenge for Hong Kong. As an economist, I always think that population aging is a cause, but it's also a consequence of a weak economy that we are facing in Hong Kong today. So hopefully, towards the end of my presentation, we can start talking about potential policies, and I think Wendy already mentioned some of them already. So let me start by saying, population aging is not unique to Hong Kong. Is a common phenomenon, especially for advanced economies. We know old people, after working for so many years, they want to work less, they want to retire early, especially after accumulating a lot of wealth. So therefore, there has been a lot of research studying OECD and advanced economies, trying to assess the relationship between population aging and low productivity and economic growth. Here I'm just telling you a few examples. For example, for the US, there has been a study showing that 10% increase in the 60-plus population will reduce GDP per capita by around 5.5%, right? I mean, this elasticity is actually quite big. In terms of productivity growth, we know the most actively working and also productive workforce for advanced economies like the US is actually for people between 40 and 49 years old. If that share of workforce is shrinking, productivity growth of that economy will also decline. Specifically for the US, a 5% increase in the size of this cohort over a 10-year period will lead to 1.7% higher productivity growth in each year of the decade, right? I mean, this is huge productivity growth if we can maintain a constant share of this workforce. Again, the workforce for the people between 40 and 49. And as Professor Cheung has already mentioned, we actually lost a lot of this group of people from Hong Kong in the last few years because of emigration, because of out-migration. Although we have newcomers, especially from mainland China, but are those people looking for jobs here? Are those people able to find jobs? Or are they really interested in finding jobs in Hong Kong, or just trying to come to Hong Kong to settle their kids in local schools, or try to get a visa for them to travel abroad? I mean, this is a huge issue that we really have to discuss. In addition to just labor supply, we also know that young people usually are more motivated to come up with new ideas. Majority of the startups are actually created by people between the age of 25 and 44. In terms of welfare, we know there has been some policy change in China, trying to postpone the retirement age. It is going to increase labor supply, but it would help very little in terms of driving up productivity. Welfare is a huge issue, which has already been mentioned by multiple panelists just now. I'm going to talk about the implication for the Hong Kong government budget and long-term structural deficits that we may need to deal with down the road. Some basic facts that have already been discussed. Let me emphasize that Hong Kong is aging fast because of low birth rate and increasing life expectancy among the old people. As of today, Hong Kong is the city in the world that has the longest life expectancy, 86 years old for men, 88 for women, and this number can only increase because of improvement in medical technology and medical services. The median age in Hong Kong right now is 47 years old, and is going to increase to 56 by 2046. So all these sort of facts that we have to deal with, but let me emphasize that population aging is not only a cause of weak economic growth, but also a consequence of weak economic growth. There's a phenomenon which has been well documented by recent research, and I have done some work in the last few years looking at the phenomenon which is called the hollowing out of the middle class. or Wendy has put it even more descriptively in a previous presentation. It's called the M-shaped society. And I'm not talking about the recent emigration from Hong Kong and therefore we lose the middle income and middle class people. I'm talking about a long time phenomenon for the last 2 decades that middle income jobs are actually disappearing. So how did I do this research? Well, you look at Hong Kong population census, divide the occupations into 3 groups, low income, middle income, and high income. The jobs available for middle income group are actually shrinking for the last 20 years already. So it's not a new phenomenon. And I would like to argue that in addition to whatever reasons that people migrated to England or to Canada, to Australia, one of the very important economic reasons is that those middle income people were not able to find jobs for themselves, or if they were lucky to maintain their jobs, the income growth has not been catching up with inflation and the rising cost of rising cost of living in Hong Kong. So therefore, they got discouraged, they didn't see the future, and some of them may realize that, making a living in England or some foreign countries may be easier than making a living in Hong Kong. All right, so this is an ongoing phenomenon. And again, this is not unique to Hong Kong. We have seen this happening in the US before, and we started seeing the same phenomenon in major cities in China, like Shanghai and Beijing. So as an economist, I would like to point out to one very important issue, that is the burden on public health costs. Public health spending amounted to 67% of total medical spending. Only the rich will be able to have access to private medical services. Elderly patients constitute half of accident and emergency admissions and 1/3 of outpatient visits. Chronic disease has become more prevalent. Currently, close to 2 million people have chronic disease, and this number will increase to 3 million, which is close to 40% of the population by 2039. Hong Kong's public health expenditure as a share of tax revenue is the highest in the world, which is around 27%. And among public health expenditure, which represent 12% of GDP, the growth rate of public health spending will only increase, and it has surpassed the growth rate of GDP since 2010. And if population aging did not get resolved, either through higher birth rates or through migration, by 2040, every year public health expenditure will only increase by 9% per year until 2040, okay? So these are huge burden, not only for the Hong Kong government, but for the public, because if the cost of public health increase, for older people who get sick and they want to go to hospitals for whatever services, the wait is longer, the quality of services will be lower, and then living longer is actually quite painful for people who get older. On Monday, I gave a talk at the Asia Financial Forum, and they want me to talk about aging as well, but the focus is about how the insurance sector can actually contribute to lower public health costs and also make older people more protected. OECD estimates show that retirees need an income around 70% of their last years of income in order to maintain the same quality of life. Obviously, you can argue they don't need to maintain the same quality of life, but let's look at Hong Kong. People who worked for many years have MPF. There have been sort of complaints about how low the return is from our MPF account. And research has shown that people who retire with MPF only have around 34% of lifetime income as compared to what they made when they're working, which is much lower than the OECD average, and which is around 53%, right? So if you need 70% of your last years of income in order to maintain the same quality of life, 34%, which is half of it, which means that you probably have to cut your quality of life by half, quantitatively speaking. So there's a huge opportunity for the insurance sector to contribute, and surveys also show that only 40% of the Hong Kong people before retirement are financially prepared for that, and 30% of the retirees, because of underprotection, actually fell into poverty right away after they retire, right? I mean, so the pictures shown by Professor Yip must be convincing you already. So finally, let's look at a structural issue. I don't have a solution for this, but I just want to point you to this picture. First, the red line shows the rapid increase in government expenditure since 2016, right? The Hong Kong government has been blaming COVID and the expenditure to solve COVID problems as a result of budget deficit in the last 4 years. But in fact, expenses on public health on anti-poverty programs, on social welfare have been increasing since 2016. And it will never come down for two reasons, right? First, once the government issue public health and welfare support, it is extremely difficult for them to take it back. And second, population aging is not a short-term problem, and it is very difficult to revert. Luckily, we're in Hong Kong, which is a small city. We can rely on immigration, but immigration needs to be well thought, right? You know, we need not only bodies, not only people, we actually need the relevant kind of people for us to fill in the low labor market participation gap. Another side of the story is, you know, the reason why budget is rising is of weak revenue growth. As we know, Hong Kong has relied for many years on land sales. With the weak property market, and in the long run, it's unlikely to see a vibrant property market to support high government revenue. We really need to broaden the tax base for the Hong Kong government. So today we're not talking about taxation, but I think, you know, you either come up with lower expenses or higher government revenue. Otherwise, you know, budget deficit will become a structural and long-term issue, which is going to affect other services provided by the government, such as education, such as medical services. So I don't have specific policy suggestions, but I just want to highlight, you know, aging and weak economic growth, a chicken and egg problem. We have to deal with both of them simultaneously and very strategically. Thank you.
So thank you, Professor Tang. Your sort of analysis complements the other three talks very, very well. So, but last but not least, let's welcome Professor Lui, please.
Thank you, Alex. One of the privilege of being the last speaker is that, you know, we have already heard all these good ideas from the previous speakers, and they have already come up with a very comprehensive picture. So what I need to do is to just bring in a couple of observations that I have made. I put the title of my presentation is quite often when we talk about population policy or the population issue, thinking as if it's just a population problem in hand. But in fact, one of the things that I want to throw out is it's always bigger. It's always a bigger issue. And that's why I think Anthony, towards the end of his presentation, he mentions about kind of social envisioning. And Paul concluded by telling us a tall list of issues that we need to address when we really take a serious look at the problem. And the problem is an old problem as well. In Anthony's presentation, he mentioned about the beginning of this kind of task force in 2002. But if you roll back further, around the mid-1980s, it was a period of time when Hong Kong discussed about importation of manufacturing labor. Of course, the debate gradually died down, mainly because of trade unions' resistance, but more importantly is because of the further opening up of the Pearl River Delta. So as a result, relocation, instead of thinking about the labor force issue, is a lot easier to handle, because what you need to do is move your factory across the border. So in other words, issues about human resources, about having a right balance of a demographic structure, it goes back something like 40 years. And one of the interesting things about the population policy issue is that, you know, the problem comes out now and then. It's never quite able to receive the kind of attention that it calls for. Sometimes it's because of very contextual factors, like what I just said. When you think that's very seriously about shortage of labor, then suddenly you have the opening up of the Pearl River Delta, and then everyone forget about it, and then you just do something else. Same thing. I think since 2002, various reports have came out, and we have entertained various ideas, but then towards the end of it, I think we're still looking for a solution rather than really having a perspective on it. Part of the reason is that not only is old, but at the same time, it's a very broad policy issue We have already talked a lot about the demographic structure issues, birth rate, and so on and so forth. It also touched on human resources. Everyone wants to have immigrants to cover the highly skilled sector, but at the same time, we also need to think about what about the low skilled sector as well. We probably would have measures that so that we have enough construction workers and so on and so forth. These are just two examples. Of course, Paul, when in his review, has already tell us that how many areas that population policies would need to cover. And so, quite honestly, to be fair, why we have been dragging on is because it's not easy to deal with, because it's always required a very broad and comprehensive perspective in order to really address this kind of issue one by one. The second thing related to population policy is that we have to recognize the limitations of the role of the state. Every speaker reminded us that low birth rate is a global issue. Aging population is a global issue. A lot of governments have headache about it, and then everyone wants to re-engineer the birth rate, number of people get married, and so on and so forth. The most easy option is that you offer economic incentive, partly because it is the easiest way to pretend that you're acting like a state. One of the things about being a government is that most of the time you don't have solutions, but you need to pretend to be doing something. And one easy thing is, giving out $20,000 seems to be doing something. At least some people will be happy. At least you have 2,000 babies more. But whether there's a solution to the problem, well, we know it's not. But something has been done. But then we know very well that this is not enough. This is not quite addressing the issue. Paul has already told us that you better address the issue about people getting married than having babies. At the same time, when you discuss issues about getting married, then it's all about overall supports to families. And then very easy for the government to think that, okay, then it's about the number of days for maternity leave. And then later on, you entertain paternity leave. But we all understand that it's also about education, it's also about housing, it's also about all kinds of things like childcare and so on and so forth, support from other families and etc. So it always required a broader perspective that most of the time the government would like to shy away from. Okay. As a result of that, probably you won't be able to address this kind of natural growth of the population. Then you shift to migration. It's very easy for us to think that, okay, we can cook up short-term and medium-term strategies so that you can import those desirable people to come into your population structure. But at the same time, like what briefly mentioned by Heiwai and so on, when you talk about immigration, it's not just about numbers, it's not just about retention, it's not just about having people coming in, because whether they really come in to give you the sort of skills that you are short of, or rather that you just have headcounts of people coming in, or rather people coming in and not looking for jobs. In fact, they're settling their families and so on. So actually, we need to have a much longer term and broader perspective to really think about, are we going to groom imported talents? Like we not only having an immigration policy, but in fact, we would like young people from neighboring regions or other countries to come in at a young age, regroom them, and then to have enough incentive or attractive features so that they will stay behind. I think that was the experience of some of the very successful countries in doing that, so that, a lot of the top students actually come from abroad. In fact, a lot of the new talents coming from these people doing undergrad degrees or postgraduate studies, and then they stay behind and contribute to longer term economic development. So you would have a longer term process, a grooming process, but also very, very selective. You're not interested in having all kinds of people coming in. You have to be frank to yourself. Being a city, you need to be very selective, because you're not running welfare for the whole world. So what's the strategy? And then lastly, I would like to throw out a question that I think would be rather politically incorrect and not welcoming, is I would like to say that, you know, hey, let's look at Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong is a city. And one of the interesting features of being a city is that most of the time you need to exploit resources from neighboring regions, quite honestly, and from outside. That's the only way that, you know, city would have enough supply of food, resources, and all kinds of things, and people as well. But Hong Kong is a very special city because we have one country, two systems. This is a framework we won't be able to touch, and then it shouldn't be touched at all. But it does impose restrictions on the mobility of people and factors of production. And we need to recognize it. Otherwise, you still assume that, you know, we are just another city in the world, so that we would have free flows of people in and out according to market conditions, costs, and so on, which is not quite the case. This is exactly the reason why Hong Kong cannot manage the so-called population questions like many other cities. I tend to think that some cities won't have to need to worry too much about an aging population because you would have a continuous inflow of people just coming in, looking for jobs from the countryside, from neighboring regions, and so on, without a lot of regulations. Of course, they would affect the status of people coming in, but still, you can easily have classification. As a result, people would decide whether they would like to come in, stay behind, or not. And then the same thing for people approaching retiring age. You would look for a low-cost region, and then you would work out a plan for yourself. But Hong Kong, we do have certain restrictions of that. So quite honestly, I do think that, you know, Hong Kong is facing all these challenges already presented by other speakers, and I have nothing to add. But I'm just saying that, you know, the real challenge for us is about the mindset. How would we be able to stick with the one country, two system framework, but at the same time to really practically and realistically to think about how to loosen some of these constraints by really seriously embedding Hong Kong in a regional context. I think for the past many years, Hong Kong has been thinking that, okay, we get in trouble, then probably Beijing would lend a helping hand, and then would be policy favoring Hong Kong. And so that we have been dreaming and thinking that, you know, what if Guangdong would open up and recognize Hong Kong people, and so that they would help us to cover some of the medical services and cover some of the old people caring and so on and so forth. I think instead of thinking about people, why they should open up for you, I think we need to think about what would be the more sustainable and viable financial plan so that we can really actually buy services, or at least to create a situation where our neighboring actors in the region would be happy and forthcoming to help, instead of a policy from the above, from Beijing, and say, okay, now doors open, people, then you can take advantage of it. I don't think a city can always take advantage of the neighboring region by doing nothing. You need to work out the system, whereas there would be a really free flow of resources, and then people are really happy to open the door, and so that we can address the issue by going beyond the limit, the physical limit of this city. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And now we have completed the 5 individual talks, and then the floor is open. I think we have like 40 minutes for discussion. So any questions from the floor? And we are happy to, to take questions, a few questions from Zoom, the Zoom users, please. Feel free to raise your hand. Questions? Yes, British, please.
Thank you, professors, for the wonderful talk. My question is particularly to Dr. Hongwen. When you mentioned about labor force participation, you mentioned there's a difference between male and female labor force participation, especially in Hong Kong. What are the reasons behind that, and how do you think that can be addressed?
Hi. Hi, thanks for your question. Actually, Hong Kong's women participation rate is dropping significantly when they reach the year of 30, and even more significant after 40. We can see more than 20% gap between female and male. And if we compare with Singapore and also Japan, Hong Kong, we have those foreign domestic helper. We have 3,100 domestic helper. Even with that, our women participation rate is very low. Why is that? I try to give some answers here because first is the culture issue. We women be the housewife taking care of the kids. But another two issues I mentioned in my discussion. One is our housing policy. We pour almost we pour 70% of our resources to public rental housing and making public rental housing the best choice for citizens. So you need to be qualified for even queuing up for public rental housing or qualify for keep your public rental house. If you already live inside, you have a limitation of your income. This housing structure locked up a huge percentage of our population. Another reason is our social welfare system. If you lie flat, so-called 躺平, then you get more. If you stand up, then you will lose. Say, for example, our Zhongwen SSC is calculated in a family. There's case that when the kids grow up to 18 years old, the mother prohibited him to go join the market, to go to work, because when he has income, will influence the whole family's welfare. That is I think this kind of, we are discouraging people to stand up and stand on their feet. So I think we need policies on both push and pull. On the push side, I think we may consider a time limitation for those able-bodied person in working age. We have to limit their, the time for their to rely on taxpayers' money, and also provide incentives to encourage them to join to engage in the workforce.
Thank you, Dr. Hong. And then when we have collected a question from Zoom, and a PhD student from Peking University, Charles Li Guanyu, and the question is Tokyo government. So he brings in the Japanese case. Tokyo government official AI powered dating app Tokyo Subi has been officially launched in 2024. Use of the app requires a registration fee, verification documents, and a virtual interview for residents of Tokyo to gain access to its services, which means that the Tokyo government proactively protect people from dating scams and encouraging dating officially, aiming to increase the local birth rate. So government serving as the virtual matchmaker. So would a similar attempt be made by Hong Kong government? Would this, electronic nudging be effective? Why or why not? So see which speaker wants to take the question. Dating, yes, Professor Cheung.
Basically, this is a mechanism to encourage young people to date. Now, of course, in my view, I've been a young person before. In my view, when you're a young person, you know how to date. And given the right circumstances, you have the incentive. But just echoing what Professor Lui Tai-lok has said, there is a limit as to what the state can do. I remember several decades ago, I think it was in the 1980s, Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, he had created this love boat strategy, encouraging young people to get together and hopefully to date. And eventually that did not prove to be effective. So I think nothing wrong with that, but I don't think we should sort of build a hope on that. It's a bit like the new baby bonus. When you have the money to spend, fine, encourage people to bear a child, But as what Professor Paul Yip has just mentioned, there's a limit. So you need sort of a larger factors, the atmosphere. And since I'm speaking, maybe I take the opportunity to articulate one further point. Having listened to the other panelists, including what Professor Loy has said in his concluding remarks, probably Hong Kong needs to look at population in a regional manner. We need a regional perspective to population policy. Because up to recently, we have been envisaging Hong Kong as Hong Kong standalone. So we are looking at Hong Kong, well, we are our own jurisdiction, as if a country, as if an independent city, sort of unrelated to others. And then we have to solve all the problems that we have inherited or created. But if we look at it regionally, then Hong Kong is part of a larger region, whether in terms of labor participation, mobility, aging. Now, if we look at GBA, for example, it's less aging. So how would that affect Hong Kong if we sort of emerge more deeply into the GBA regionally? And also in terms of population trends, the low birth rate, the aging of the population, I think those trends, to me, it could not be stopped in a short to medium term. So we should treat those, the low birth rate and aging population as a given. Now, if they are given, then the challenge is how do we manage the population with those features? So our focus should be on, okay, in terms of labor participation, the content of the labor force, the content of productivity. Now, Professor Tang Heiwai said, and I'm interested in that observation, that the middle class, the middle income occupations are on demise, right? So I wonder why. What are the implications compared to other economies? So can we do something about that? It's not just because middle income people are migrating outward. I think it's more than that. It's the structure of the economy. So the point is we cannot stop aging, we cannot stop low birth rate, but we can do something about the substance of that kind of population. And if we take a more regional perspective, maybe we will look at the solutions differently from what we have been used to dealing with population as Hong Kong on its own. Now, if that is the case, I would suggest perhaps we don't need to have a large population size. 7 million, would that be sufficient? Now, if we need to be a standalone city, maybe we need more. I think that's the direction that Singapore is going. But if we look at Hong Kong within GBA, maybe the question should be crafted differently.
Great. Yes, we collected second question from Zoom, Henry Koch, and he raised a very simple question. What do the panelists think about the implications of budget deficit and student population decline in the higher education sector? So which speaker wants to take the question, please? Professor Tang and Dr. Hong?
You go first.
You go first.
So particularly on higher education, I think the Hong Kong SAR government has decided to internationalize more of the undergraduate student body. In the past, as we know, public universities in Hong Kong had a quota of 20% for non-local students, and now that ratio has increased to 40%. And of that additional 20%, there's also some mandates from the Hong Kong government, and I don't remember exactly the number. A significant portion has to be non-Chinese students. So I can speak for Hong Kong University that the undergraduate admission committee has tried very hard to attract non-Chinese students outside of Hong Kong, in particular Southeast Asia and the Middle East, to come to Hong Kong U, and then we even try to raise some scholarships to support their tuition. So I think with that model, the burden of higher education on the Hong Kong government should be lower over time, given that the young population is shrinking. But about the budget deficit, I think if the Hong Kong government could not come up with a long-term solution to overcome the structural budget deficit problem, it will have negative impact not only on education, but almost every public service provision by the Hong Kong government. So I hope the short-term solution is to reduce government internal spending by making it more efficient before they consider cutting some public service provision, which is going to lower our competitiveness in the long run.
Okay, so Dr. Hong, please.
Yeah, I would like to follow Dr. Tang. Let me give you some data. The cost for UGC to support one undergraduate student each year is 330,000 each year. But now we are charging the non-local students ranging 150 to 280. Actually, we are subsidizing non-local students. We are charging them additional teaching cost, not the total cost. When we are increasing our non-local student number to double it to 40%, that means we need to subsidize more. Currently, each year, according to my calculation, if we're talking only about the undergraduate, the subsidies provided for non-local students is around 10 billion. That means if we double the size, we will subsidize to 20 billion each year. I think the solution is we can gradually increase the tuition fee, aiming at taking back the cost. We are not turning it into an industry to earn money, but we can collect the cost. And at the same time, we can provide more subsidies to those undergraduate students from other countries and scholarship to attract high quality students to Hong Kong.
Professor Yip, please.
I think in Australia, I think about 4 to 5% their GDP, they are earning the money from the overseas education. So actually, it's nothing wrong to earn money. I mean, from charging the overseas student, especially if they think, if they're willing to come to Hong Kong, I think to receive their education. And at the same time, I think our school fees for a local student, it has not been raised in the past 20 years, right? So that's why now there's talk about from 40,000 every year, they increase by some $1,000 or $2,000. As long as I think no one will be declined to receive the higher education because of the financial problem, then I think we should allow, to increase, the school fees. I think when you say, like the student to go to the ESF, each year they're paying about $80,000 or $90,000. If they go to the private school, they even cost $150,000. So actually, those families, they can afford, to pay for this. Of course, I think now when we talk about the public policy, I think we might be able to bring some students in here and then they can receive the education, then we encourage them to stay back here. That's good. So I think if you like to have a hybrid model, right? One, you do not want to over-subsidize them, but at the same time, actually, I think we still can really have some financial gain. But one thing I'd like to go back to, Anthony mentioned about the Singapore situation. To be fair, I think the TFR now is still about 1.2. It's still about 60 or 70% higher than in Hong Kong. So although the TFR doesn't bounce back, but at least I think the policy will slow down, the rate of reduction, right? So I think that is something we have to acknowledge this. And I do think that whenever you talk about these apps or something, but you do need to have sufficient safety measure, like we have the phone scam for anything now. I mean, one of our students lose $9 million now. First of all, I don't know why he has $9 million to lose, right? But one thing is that we have to ensure that I think that is a safe place. I mean, to be fair, I do know some students, they do lack of the opportunities, I think, to go out. I think our good old days, we can go to play football, to do this. A lot of kids now, they stay at home. They are the hikikomori time. They are not going out. So you need to create a platform, I think, to go out. So I do think that there's nothing wrong to do it if it's safe, and also you do not have to let the government to do it. I mean, the NGO can do it too. But I think it is. But the most important things that you need to create an environment that's conducive, I think, for them, that they like to intermingle with people, they like to have the family here. I mean, that is the important thing. If you don't have that, I mean, everybody, they're so disconnected with one another, then there's not much you can do. This is the hardcore thing that's hard to address.
Alex, if I can come in, and back to the question about higher education. I think it's a typical example in Hong Kong is that you conflate everything, and then you package it as if you have a policy, and then you are addressing many issues. For example, you're turning Hong Kong into an education hub. You are turning higher education into an industry, and so on and so forth. But once you unpack it, and then you find a lot of self-contradictory elements. Wendy has already mentioned that we have high costs in our higher education sector, but we are charging very low education fees, school fees for non-local students. Unlike in Australia, unlike in the UK, you probably have two split sectors for local, non-local students. So you work very clearly that for local students, this is an overall strategy about social mobility, about making sure that all the young talents would have the education that they deserve. On the other hand, you turn higher education into an industry so that you earn. And I do think that there's nothing wrong with it. And in fact, if you look at a lot of other countries, they are not just focusing on the curriculum itself. Private halls nowadays, dormitories, is a big business in the UK. It's just run like a hotel. Hong Kong now is picking up, but still, at the same time, most of the time in Hong Kong, whenever we think about universities, then we think, okay, we need to build more halls. And now increasingly, a lot of these dormitories are way outside of campus. And then you say, we build it for the sake of improving quality of campus life, though that probably you would take public transport to go back to your dormitory. This, I think, is laughable. You're not exactly doing it. At the same time, I think it's perfectly okay for us to open up the higher education sector to have a lot more non-local students, because we want to internationalize the campus so the students will have wider exposure. And at the same time, I would like to say that it is a very good process to select young talents coming to Hong Kong. They get educated in Hong Kong, they have a touch of Hong Kong's cultural life and social life, and then they would decide whether they would like to stay behind. And they receive the kind of education we think would have the skills compatible with Hong Kong's future economic development. But quite honestly, nowadays, in Hong Kong, at the university level, when we recruit non-local students, one of the things that I would look into, I was once a member of a team for recruiting students. The most important thing is I would be able to get the 状元, those score very high in the Gaokao, because I need to report that I recruited cream, right? But that person, I once bumped into one of those students, is that he came to Hong Kong and studied pure physics. And by the time of the second year, he noticed that actually this is not really a subject that Hong Kong places a lot of emphasis on in terms of industry, in terms of overall, and so on. And so he finds himself, it's quite funny. You give me a scholarship. I come here, I study, I do well, but towards the end of my study, I need to think about going back home or going somewhere else. So what's the strategy behind all this? That's the things that I never quite able to work out. So I think we're facing a lot of challenges. But the more important thing is when we think about the solutions, I think at least we need to reduce all these self-contradictory elements and make sure that, it really works towards certain ends, certain objectives that we think would be important for Hong Kong.
Professor Cheung, as the former university president, anything to add?
Well, I've always believed that education, in a way, is a form of social investment. So the question is not about spending money on education, but whether money is spent wisely. Whether there's value for money spent. And in fact, as what Wendy has pointed out in her presentation, in terms of welfare, in terms of housing, maybe education as well, and other things, health, they're all very costly. And if we just follow the current population trend, the current trend of practice, policy practice, and we are not going to change the way we do things, we are going into great trouble. In terms of burden, fiscal burden, the deficit is really certainly structural. So it's now perhaps important for us to look at existing services, the way of delivery, the basis of the policy more fundamentally. I think that's a kind of reform we should be talking about. It's not just adding a lot of new things, but to rethink, re-examine the way we do things. Not all of the same. We are still caring for the elderly. We are still caring for people's housing. But maybe the way we have been doing it may have been outdated because the policy was started several decades ago. At that time, we faced a different scenario, a different kind of society. And one more point about budget deficit, because I noticed that recently there's been a lot of discussion. But most of the time, our focus has been on overall budget deficit. Maybe it's useful, I think it's useful, to separate the overall deficit with recurrent deficit. Because for recurrent expenditure, recurrent revenue, these are the main areas of concern. For recurrent expenditure, probably we can't do a lot of things. Otherwise, affect services, people's living. So the only way is to re-engineer, to restructure the way we do things. We still need to spend the money, but spend it differently. And also in terms of revenue, there are certain regular channels, but maybe because of the performance of the economy, we have not been receiving as much. In the past, the policy of the government, dating from the pre-1997 days, had always been, we try to have a surplus, even for recurring expenditure versus recurring revenue. And then whatever we can achieve by way of non-recurring income, land sales, for example, then we accumulate surplus. And the surplus can be used to finance expansion of infrastructure and other things. But now, perhaps, we have trouble both in terms of non-recurring income and recurring income as well. And on the expenditure side, we can't trim expenditure so easily. I think that's the main challenge. So if we can't trim expenditure so easily, we might have to rethink how we do things. Maybe we need to re-engineer. I think that was a term used by Anthony Leung when he was a financial secretary 20 years ago. Maybe it's time that we re-examine the way we do things.
Any additional question from the floor? Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, professors. So it seems that now the population policy aims to maintain the number 7.5 million or increase the labor force. But since the population's decline is a reversible trend, shall we shift our focus, like instead of attracting more people, we try to build a more age-friendly city, we build more hospital, we don't just attracting talents. So would that be possible? And if so, what are the challenges? Yeah, thank you.
Let me say a few words. People have been talking about the gray hair economy. Old people have a different set of concerns. They want to take care of their health. They want to spend more money to enjoy the last decades of their lives rather than working or buying a lot of new stuff. So there have been several big discussions that I have heard in Hong Kong, including revisiting the possibility for Hong Kong to be a Chinese medicine hub, or whether we can consider building some long-term care facilities and even try to build medical tourism. I mean, all this have been mentioned, I think, like 20 years ago, but nothing obvious really happened. So I wouldn't say nothing happened, but nothing obvious happened that ordinary people observe, or actually economic activities emerge from those initiatives. So I think you're absolutely right that we have some potential to develop some new services to tailor for the older cohort of the population. But in addition to that, we also have to face the reality that the cost of production is very high. Cost of labor is still very high in Hong Kong. So I agree with Professor Louis and Professor Cheung's idea. We have to think about this more regionally, incorporating the population in the Greater Bay Area outside of Hong Kong. As we all know, a lot of Hong Kong people, hundreds of thousands of them, will cross the border every weekend to consume, initially food and just basic goods, and now even basic medical services. So, a few days ago when I spoke at the Asia Financial Forum, I said, well, Hong Kong is strong in professional service. Can we come up with some insurance products that get the people in Hong Kong to purchase using the income made in Hong Kong, but give them flexibility to use the insurance for public health services either in Hong Kong or outside of Hong Kong in the Greater Bay Area, right? So how can we leverage something that we are strong, and also what Shenzhen and Dongguan are strong, in order to use this particular sector to harness a better, effective integration. And I have to say the integration between Hong Kong and the rest of the Greater Bay Area so far has been very asymmetric and very inefficient for us, right? So we are strong in professional service, not strong in retail wholesale services. But we allow the Hong Kong people to consume the wholesale retail services outside of Hong Kong, while our professional services are not sold to the remaining 7.9 million people outside of Hong Kong. So, I mean, there's this strategy that we have to rethink how to use the young people in Shenzhen for our benefits, and how to release our old people's demand for Hong Kong and also for outside of Hong Kong in the GBA.
Great. Yes, Dr. Hong, please.
I would like to add a few words. One of the possible, supporter of our senior citizens I'm considering is increase the home ownership percentage in Hong Kong. Currently, only 49% of our families own their flats. This will create a very a big issue. In the future, we will have a lot of senior citizens without a flat of their own. They have two choices. One is to queue up for public rental housing. Second, rent the private housing. But when you reach the age of 70, 80, nobody will rent their house to you. You have no choice but spend all your money and then get back to the public rental housing, which means you have to rely on all social welfare. So I think we need to encourage people to own their flats. And let me get back to the first question. How can we encourage young people to get married and have a child? I think, also take housing as an example. More than 50% of Hong Kong's youth belong to the class of so-called sandwich class. They are not eligible for queuing up for public rental housing, but they cannot afford private housing. What are their solutions? They live in a subdivided unit. 34% of subdivided unit families are actually sandwich classes. They live with their families, or they, if they have some saving, they queue up for the home ownership scheme. But for the past 20 years, the home ownership scheme subscribed by 50 times. Even now, when the property price dropping, it's more than 10 times. So many of them just reluctant to get married or get children. So I think the best way to encourage our youth to get married and have children is to promote upward mobility to them. We should reallocate resources from solely focus on grassroots to support those lower middle class, those sandwich class, and mobilize them to move up the social ladder.
Great. The first young man who asked a question in the classroom who happens to be my PhD student. So I think his supervisor should ask a question too. My question is about AI. This is a University of Science and Technology. So since early 2023, everybody has started talking about AI. AI is a game changer. And the biggest impact of AI is it's taking away jobs. And according to some analysis, in China alone, the artificial intelligence will replace 90 million jobs away from the mainland Chinese market, the labor market. So I was wondering, according to your analysis, your views, how is AI going to alter the labor market dynamics in Hong Kong, and how the demography will change because of this labor displacement effect? Thank you.
So I actually just came back from San Francisco 2 weeks ago. I attended the annual American Economic Association meeting. The 200 sessions, 1/3 of them are about AI, either about the AI on the labor market or how to use AI to do better research. My overall summary of the meetings is that people tend to worry about the displacement effect too much. So let me point out two things, right? First, according to the US experience, half of the jobs that we have in the US right now did not exist 50 years ago. At the same time, jobs that existed 50 years ago after the Second World War are no longer with us. Technologies displace jobs, but they also create new jobs. So in the end, I think AI can be used to create new opportunities. There's no empirical evidence so far to show that we are in some sort of long-run existential crisis. Human beings are resilient enough to find opportunities for themselves. Two anecdotes, right? One anecdote is Lawrence Summers, the former president of Harvard, in a public conference, once said, right? He regretted telling his grandchildren to learn coding 10 years ago, and now coding appears to be displaceable by AI, which seems to be more accurate and faster than human programmers. And then the moderator asked him, what would he suggest to his newest grandkid who was just born? And then Lawrence Summers said, well, I would encourage her to do more collective performance, like group music, group dancing, group performance. So I guess we should think about AI on a more positive way, that it will save some of our time and allow possibly some of us to enjoy lives better and have free time to consume services and performance, etc.
And to date, right?
And hopefully to date. But on the dating part, I have to also add one more thing. Also in the conference, someone talked about Mark Zuckerberg. Because Mark Zuckerberg last year made a prediction that in the next 10 years, the growth of AI agents will be much faster than population growth, which means that human beings are going to spend a lot more time talking to AI agents rather than human beings. I think this is beyond negative economic impacts. There may be some social issues that we really have to address. Right. I mean, we should have another panel to talk about AI governance, but I think AI needs to be regulated. We shouldn't just let big tech companies to drive innovation.
Thank you. We have barely 5 minutes left, so I think we can respond to the one last question from Ms. Wang from EdUHK. So let me read it out in case majority of people cannot see the question. So I want to expand on the first question from Zoom. I believe Hong Kong could adopt a similar on dating apps such as Japan. I think young people have lesser confidence on intimate relationship nowadays due to the prevalence of scams on dating apps in Hong Kong, as reported by the police. So these dating scams contribute to a decline in confidence among the younger generation when it comes to starting relationships, which ultimately results in fewer marriages and children. So any Any thoughts from the panel? Regulating, for example, regulating this virtual space?
Well, I responded to the earlier question on such app introduced by Tokyo. I think, yes, I mean, in terms of security regarding access to apps and other AI-related instruments, I think, of course, we should do more so that people are not subject to scams. But on the other hand, I find interesting that maybe I belong to the older generation because in my days, we did not have AI, we did not have apps when it comes to dating, and we still dated. And we through activities, social interaction, but maybe nowadays young people, they interact more with the device. That's why the app is so important. But still, I think, yes, we encourage young people to be social, to get to know other people through various means. But when it comes to government policy, I think it's not so effective. The government can do things that really induce people to have a lot of babies or to get married. If people decide not to get married, you can't force them. I mean, I mentioned Lee Kuan Yew in the 1980s. The Love Boat policy was to encourage people to get married. But still, no, not or the latest initiative by the SL government, the newborn baby bonus. As Paul has mentioned, yes, 2,000 more, but then we spend a lot of money. So I think it's the overall environment, mobility, opportunities, livability of a city. I think all this count when it comes to having a family.
I have to clarify, I don't think the 2,000 extra baby is from the 20,000.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe less than that.
Yeah, that's an actual bonus.
So it might be it's a mixture of everything. That is the late marriage, the catch-up effect, the so-called the dragon year effect.
Yes.
But actually, I mean, what I think is that you do not expect the government to do something. Actually, you might be able to do something. I mean, within the school system, I mean, they maybe, I think, have more activities. I mean, nowadays, I think after our student society has been has disappeared, then there's less activities for the students. So I think it would be good. I mean, for the students, they come up. I mean, you can remind your good old days, right? I mean, sometimes when we make our better half, you know, it's in the university years, right? So I think it's very important for them to get out, you know, I mean, to have the opportunity to interact with everyone. But now some people, they feel more comfortable to talk to the AI, to talk to this
ChatGPT.
Yeah, the ChatGPT. They tend to be more considerate. Anyway. So
great. We're exactly coming to 12 o'clock.
Can I just add one more point about Singapore? I think a very important incentive for young people to get married. Because in Singapore, if you are a single person, you're not eligible for public housing until you are of the age of 35. But if you get married, then you are almost, you can get public housing allocation rather quickly. They have built to order kind of arrangement. And also, public housing in Singapore largely is for sale. So it's like the home ownership scheme in Hong Kong. Whereas in Hong Kong, the huge majority of our public housing is rental. So there's a big difference.
Thank you, our panelists. It has been really, really stimulating morning, 2 hours, and then we entertained lots of questions. So the insights generated are very, very useful. So before we close the session, can I suggest all of you to join me in thanking the speakers, please? Thank you so much. And let me also propose we take a group photo.
Sure.
Johnny, can I help? Let's stand.